Welcome back all, it's Daz from Modero Techniques. I'm lucky enough here to be today with George from Soundtraxx here at the beautiful Durango, Colorado in USA. I reached out to George some few weeks back, or probably a month or so ago now, and he invited me along, and what we're going to do in this video. He's going to take us through the production process of their beautiful Soundtraxx DCC decoders and the like. So George, thanks very much for inviting me along. It's going to be a very big eye-opener. I was actually really excited about this. I came to Durango primarily to go onto the Durango-Silverton Railway, and then I found out Soundtraxx were also in Durango, so here we are.
Oh, come on. It's got to be the other way around. You knew Soundtraxx was here, and you found out the Durango and Silverton was here also.
Correct. That's what Michelle told me anyway. Michelle kept from Colorado Model Railway.
There you go.
Museum. What we're going to do now is we're going to quickly go. George is going to take the camera around into the factory area and is going to show us some of the manufacturing side of things, which will be fantastic.
Hey guys, George at Soundtraxx here, and we're welcoming you guys in for a quick little tour of our Soundtraxx facility here in Durango, Colorado. If any of you guys ever do manage to make it out here to see that pesky old steam train that we have in town here, you guys are welcome to come get a tour of the factory. Just give us a shout and let us know, and we'll coordinate with your schedule and try to get you to come in. But this is going to be a real quick glimpse of what you would see with our factory. Now, we actually do build and manufacture all of our electronics here in-house, and this is done on purpose because we want to make sure that we have control of it. And so that way, not only can we guarantee that you're getting a good product in your hand the first time, as you'll see throughout the process, but also because we can respond quickly. So if there's a rush, let's say, for example, on an Alco decoder, then we can quickly build Alco decoders and get them back on the shelf, because that way we're doing it here instead of waiting for a contract manufacturer to fit it in their space and to make sure that they get it to us, which could be several months depending on what their schedule looks like as well. But welcome to the manufacturing floor. Now, a couple of little things. First off, this building was built for us. We built this building, and we designed the manufacturing floor as a clean room. And what that is all of our technicians downstairs in the manufacturing floor are wearing anti-static shoes, and they're wearing special anti-static smocks. And then when they're working on the circuit boards, you're going to notice that they have a grounding strap around their wrist that's tied to the table. And that way it makes sure that our static is minimally, to make sure that we don't have static electricity problems. We also have a special anti-static floor material, and the coating on it, it's anti-skid, and it also doesn't track. So we've pretty much eliminated static electricity, but we're going to go through the process to make sure, because as you guys know, static electricity can kill a circuit board. We have also followed a lot of what's called LEED principles in the building of this building here. And what that is LED lighting, wide open windows, a lot of natural light coming through, but we didn't feel it was worth the extra $30,000 just to get the little LEED certification on our building. And so we've gone through those principles. We're still following all that. There's a lot of recycling going on and so forth throughout the building, but we didn't actually pay for the actual certification. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and open up and talk about the manufacturing process of what it takes to get a circuit board. So when we look at our sales histories and we look at our projections and we say, okay, in the month of, say, December, we're expecting to sell X number of decoders. Well, what we do is we start looking at that in September, because we want to start getting parts here and make sure that we have parts ready to go for those builds. So our technicians downstairs start working on the ordering, and they start making sure that we're going to source products. Now, at the beginning of the year, we work with our suppliers, and we put together a projection for throughout the entire year, and we have what's called a bonded inventory. And what that means is that the suppliers that we're buying from kind of know what we're going to build throughout the year, so they have those parts and can order them in advance of us needing them, so that when we actually call up, we can get the parts brought over fairly quickly, usually within a week of once we're ready. But we start looking ahead and we start building it out, and this is why we're looking at it in September, is if we've had big runs or things like that, our actual projections may have changed throughout the year. So we work with our suppliers, and our suppliers are here and overseas and so forth, but we try to use domestic suppliers as well, but not all of our parts are sourced here. They're usually kind of like warehouses, kind of like what you would see with a Walthers or something like that, where they collect all the stuff and then sell it to us so that we can have one-stop shopping. We also look at ordering circuit boards, because the circuit boards themselves aren't actually built here, and this is just the raw circuit board. We actually order those through a company up in Utah, and they ship them to us raw, and then we populate them here on the machines. And then we also have to look at getting the memory chips flashed and programmed. Once upon a time, we did actually do that in-house, but we actually had our programmer take a dive, and we looked at buying new ones, and they were stupid expensive. And so right now, at this moment in time, we're actually contracting that out, having them pre-flashed. So when we get them here, that we can just build them. Now we can also flash the chips here. So if we get an order and suddenly we need to increase or decrease that, we can change them up and so forth. But the bulk of them are done through this third party. Now, when we get our circuit boards, the circuit boards come together as a panel, and on this panel there may be anywhere between 5 to 6 to 10 to 20 decoders on that panel, depending on the size and shape of the decoder. And then what we do is we'll then put that through the process. So the first step on the process is what's known as the stencil printer. And what this does, it actually takes the circuit board and does a quick camera alignment to make sure everything's where it's supposed to be. Then it takes it and sets it up against a stencil, just like kind of like what screen printing t-shirts are. Then the machine will take a arm and go across it with a solder paste. Now the solder paste is basically solder balls and flux mixed together in about a toothpaste consistency. And the arm applies even pressure across to make sure that the proper amount of solder flux or solder paste is applied to each one of those circuit boards. Then when it's done, the board drops down, and then the camera comes back over and does a quick check to make sure that paste is applied where it's supposed to be and doesn't have any problems. For example, like say if it drops down, you get a little string and it lays across the connection. Well, if it catches that, then it rejects the board, and we have to wipe it off and clean it off and then restart over again. But the camera is really good at catching those problems. The next process, once that's all approved, then it moves over to the pick and place machines. And then these robots will actually grab the parts off of the reels. Now, a lot of our parts come on reels like a movie reel, kind of like what you would expect. And as one part is grabbed, the reel ticks back and is ready for the next part. Now, this robot arm will actually grab the part and populate one side of the circuit board. Now, that solder paste is tacky, so it's able to hold the parts where the robot arm puts them into place. Now, once that one side of the decoder is fully populated through the two machines that we have, then there's actually a small gap where our technician will do a quick visual inspection to make sure everything looks right, because sometimes parts can be slightly askew, or worst case, what's called tombstone, where they would actually sit upright like this. And our technicians are trained to catch that really quickly because, of course, they're looking at the same circuit board over and over again. So they're able to find those problems, fix them really quickly. If they see a major issue or something with it, then they'll pull it aside and fix it manually. Then once they're populated on one side, then they go into the oven. Now the oven actually has 8 individual stages that the circuit board will go through to gently heat the circuit board up, melt that solder paste into actual solder connections. And then those solder connections will then be made through that heat oven process, and then it's cooled through a few more zones in the oven. And as it comes out, now you have a fully populated one side of the decoder. They'll run an entire side of the decoder through the machines, and then when they're done, they'll change the machines over, they'll change the parts out, then they'll flip the board over and run it through the second time. So the second time it goes through, you'll actually have the second side populated. Now, once the second side is populated, now we stop at what we believe one of the critical spots, and this is what's called the flying probe tester. Now, this is a really cool machine, and what this does is this has sets of probes that will actually fly over the circuit board, as its name implies, and what it actually does is it will actually then test every one of those circuit boards, every one of those circuits in the board to make sure that the circuit is true, make sure the correct component was placed, and make sure that it's functional the way it's supposed to be. And once it goes through that machine, if there's a problem, it'll spit out, it'll say, for example, part number 10 on decoder 2, and then our technicians will then go over and manually test it to make sure that that actually did fail.
This video is proudly sponsored by PCBWay.com. If you're a tinkerer, inventor, or advanced electrical engineer, you need to check out PCBWay or you are seriously missing out. They are passionate about PCBs ranging from standard to advanced PCBs with 1 to 30 layers with full-featured printed circuit boards. PCBWay don't stop there. They offer basically everything you need to make your ideas a reality. Whether you need 3D prints, injection molding, or CNC machining, assembly, or basic PCB manufacturing, they can do it all for highly competitive prices. Check out their awesome services in the link below and their offer to my viewers who support this channel. Watch out for my upcoming videos where I'll be using some of their products.
Few minutes just in the history of of the company and how it came to be.
Sure, absolutely. So back in the late 80s, we have our two partners, Steve Dominguez and Nancy Workman, were working together at a marine electronics company. And they became friendly. Steve was a model railroader, and he had this idea to, for lack of a better term, build a better sound decoder. Anything that was out there was kind of, he thought was crude and kind of, we could build better than that. So he asked her to help market his new idea. So that was a partnership, and they started, the first product we actually built was late 89, was the Hyperlight. And the Hyperlight was the first processor-driven lighting control module in model railroading. You would go onto your circuit board and you would cut a trace, and the processor would then create whatever flashing light that you wanted, whether it's a gyro light, Mars light, whatever. And so we actually take the birth of the company as January of 90, because that was the first time we came out as a public entity, and we showed up at the Amherst Model Railway Train Show up in Massachusetts. And so that was our first project as a company. Then we built the sound system, and that was known as the Soundtraxx. And so our company is actually called Throttle Up Corporation. But we DBA, do business as Soundtraxx, because everybody made that synonymous term. But this was the infrared sound system that you would basically have a wireless remote control to create sound system or sound effects out of your model, and it was running on a normal DC track, but then you would point at the receiver and it would then send the signal through the rail. So it was really kind of
almost like dead rail.
It wasn't quite dead rail because it was still using DC power, but it was the first real kind of a remote control type system. And then from there, the DCC working group started getting together, and we jumped in on that. And so we were part of the original DCC discussions, and that's where we came out as the sound supplier.
Lovely.
And as the electronics continued to get smaller, we of course got bigger and bigger because more people can fit them in models. Because what would fit in this ON3 model would be a little tougher to fit in this HO model.
Ain't that the truth?
And so as the electronics got smaller, we started coming up with innovative ways. And then that's when we came out with the Tsunami, was in 2004, 2005, somewhere around there. And the Tsunami really skyrocketed because it was not only affordable, but it was also small enough that you could fit in anything on this table. And so that really turned the heads. Then other companies started using our systems as sound on board or sound equipped. And that's when other companies said, well, wait a minute, I want that too. And so now you get all the competitors in the water doing the same thing. But we were in there, we've been part of the working group, we're still part of the working group today. We still believe that the DCC standard is very, very critical to our hobby, so that that way everybody's stuff is supposed to play together nice. And you know, but as the leaders in the model railroad industry, you see a lot of things that we've done over the years. For example, one of the features we have in our Steam decoder is called Fireman Fred. Now, Fireman Fred was named after a gentleman that helped us get some of those first sounds. And that's things like shoveling coal, turning the wrenches, using the grease gun, and those type of sounds. Well, thanks, Fred, for your help. Tell you what, we'll honor you and name it Fireman Fred.
Yeah, that's cool.
Well, you know you're a leader in the industry when there are other companies out there calling their sound effects Fireman Fred sounds. So you know you're a leader at that point.
Yeah, lovely.
So we've been a leader in the industry now going on 33, almost 34 years now.
Yeah, lovely.
So it's been a great ride.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. Now, obviously, you've talked about your journey from Massachusetts to Durango. Obviously, there's a lot going in between there.
Oh, yeah.
The hobby, as you will understand, has just gone leaps and bounds. The world's best hobby, I believe. Now, why Durango for your headquarters? It's a fascinating town.
It's very fascinating,
Yeah.
but it is definitely a challenge to do a lot of things here. Basically what it is like I mentioned, Steve was a model railroader. He was an HON3 modeler, and when they first met, he kind of approached her with the idea, and she said, well, what, sound systems for toy trains? Well, he huffed and walked out the door, and she said, well, I guess that's the end of that.
Yeah.
Well, then he brings in a Fujiyama K36 and puts it on her desk. Said, no, this is a model train. This isn't a toy train like a Tyco or something.
Yeah.
And she started looking at it and go, wow, that's really cool. And that's kind of how they partnered.
Yeah.
Well, he had gone to school out here in Colorado, and so they eventually moved out here.
Sure.
They were originally in a suburb of Denver called Broomfield.
Yeah.
And when they were doing that, and at that point they were still contract manufacturing, where they would have other people build the stuff for us.
Sure.
And then the narrow gauge convention came along somewhere in that mid 90s. I don't remember exactly when it was, but then they came down for that and fell in love with the area, and so they moved the company down here because they loved this area. But
beautiful area.
that was kind of what it was ultimately. It's certainly a challenge doing business here because there's no major manufacturing reps for especially our machines or any of that kind of stuff nearby, so we have to fly them in to do work on our machines, maintenance. We have to fly just about everywhere because we go to Durango has an airport, so we go Durango to Denver, Denver to everywhere. But the small town feel really is certainly a draw, and then of course those nasty old steam engines that we see down the road.
As you say, Soundtraxx built Durangos.
Yes, there you go. Now I'm joking. Of course, I love the Durango in Silverton. I usually ride several times a year at least, and we have great working relationship with a lot of those people there. We're all friends. They all know us, and we all get along great.
I can suggest, if you do come down to Durango to do the railway, also free museum. There's a lovely HO layout with a little bit of narrow gauge as well with your branding on it. You've given all the sound decoders and the like, and I think it runs an NCE system for North American. And also, while we're on it, Michelle Kempermer also speaks highly of Soundtraxx. All of their locomotives, all bar one or two, are all Soundtraxx as well.
And those are being fixed as fast as possible.
That's right. And that's, if you ever get up to Greeley, it's about an hour, maybe an hour and a half north of Denver. Trying to orientate my mind again.
It's about 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how fast you drive.
True. I did notice driving over here, your speed limits are advisory, whereas a little more strict in Australia. So
yeah, ours are more suggestions.
some suggestions.
Until there's a black and white car down the road,
right.
then you hit the brakes.
I'm doing 65 and people going past me, probably going 100. So for Soundtraxx, and I can appreciate there's probably some things you can't say, and I'll honour that. What's in the pipeline? What direction do you think Soundtraxx are going with some of their products?
I'm not going to get too much into it right now. Our newest thing is, of course, the Blunami. This is our merge of our Tsunami product lines, as I mentioned earlier. Now we're on our Tsunami 2, but we've taken it a step farther, and now we have a wireless direct communication with Bluetooth paired directly to your smart device. And so Blunami is a pairing of Tsunami and Bluetooth, so Blunami. And what this does is this actually is a DCC decoder. You can actually hook, all these locomotives here on our table are actually Blunami equipped. We can put them on a DCC track and run them, or in the case of this ON3 RGS 41, it's actually battery power. So right now I just have a reed switch attached in the inside that I attach with a magnet, and I can fire it up. And I can operate the locomotive, and I'm just going to do this really quickly, just to kind of give you an idea. But we'll open up our Blunami app. So we've got our Blunami connected here, and so, or detected, I should say. And now I just simply connect. If I get my fingers to cooperate, there it is. So now we go into operations. Now it's going to do a quick read of all the CVs and make sure all the menus match. And when it's done, now I have full control of the locomotive. Wireless battery power. As you can see, there's no wires attached to the track. But all of this is done wirelessly connected Bluetooth from your phone directly to the decoder. So even if I was operating, you can have it powered up. Once you connect to the app, the decoder just uses the track for power.
Sure.
And so all your commands now are coming from this. And then in order to go back to DCC control, you just simply take power away and reapply power. And so in this case, like I said, this is battery powered only. And the charging port is right there in the water tank.
So that's a lithium battery?
It's a lithium ion battery. It's 11.1 volts. And the charger's at home, so I'm going to turn it off just so we can see it. But you get an idea of just what exactly it takes. But right now with Blunami, that's kind of where we're focused on.
Sure.
The Blunami frees up a lot, but like I said, it is still a DCC decoder.
Yeah.
But what you get with the Blunami is you also get the settings, all the menu to adjust all the sounds, select the sounds, make your profile, and then you can use that to run to set up your locomotive and then run it on your DCC system if you so choose.
Yeah, nice.
And so right now, I'd say that's kind of where we're focused on right now. We're looking at a lot at different board formats. We just started shipping our Blunami P&P boards, which is great for the HO drop-in diesels.
Yeah.
And we've had our 2200, which is in these two locomotives and this guy right here. And then we've also got our large scale, which is good for the larger scale. So again, going battery with G scale for garden railroads or even O scale, it's a match made in heaven. Beautiful. I mean, you've got plenty of space, battery power, so you don't have to worry about it. And now you don't have to buy all those expensive third-party wireless remote control DCC systems to get the quality sound.
Yeah.
You literally, it's a free download on your phone or your tablet, and you buy the decoder and you put it in and you're done, and you're wireless and
beautiful
and wireless remote control.
So there's a term, there was a question up here a bit, but you sort of already started answering it from a chap by the name of Neil Erickson, so big shout out to Neil from Hawaii. I interviewed him a few years ago, and he's into sort of larger scales, but that's where I sort of asked about dead rail before. There's sort of this dead rail sort of thing. So what they mean by dead rail is there's nothing powering anything off the tracks. It's pretty well a remote control train. So my understanding is this would be probably just about the first, what would you call it? Want a better phrase.
Probably self-contained wireless, wireless controlled DCC sound decoder.
Mass produced, I think, because all the other dead rail my understanding that Neil's been talking about is it's a lot of cut and shut with current DCC technology.
Right, and that's the thing, is to get a wireless control before the Blunami.
Yeah.
You had to buy the decoder from us or whoever else. Then you had to buy a third-party wireless remote control. The most common one I hear about is CVP Airwire.
Right.
Okay. And then basically what they're doing is they have a DCC throttle that has a wireless pairing to a converter. Yeah. You have to buy both of those, plus the battery, plus all the other stuff. But then you mount that circuit board in with whatever decoder you choose. Yeah. And then you're using it with their wireless remote control, which of course has limited buttons. Yeah. So you have to rely on multiple functions of each of the buttons. When you hit the pound or the asterisk, changes what some of those buttons mean. And there's not a map right there in front of you, so it's a little harder to remember. Sure. Plus, one of the advantages of using the Blunami Direct is instead of trying to remember function 22, what does that do? Yeah. You're right. And it's cab chatter, but function 22, if you wanted to have cab chatter, you'd have to, which button was it? 22. How do I access 22 on this 10 key? Yeah. And it becomes a little bit more challenging. And so what the Blunami does is not only does it give you the touch screen where you can, and everything's labeled out, so you don't have to remember function 10 does this, function 12 does that, or whatever. You just label it right there. And you also get a wireless remote control without having to buy all the third-party stuff. So it's definitely a step ahead. And just like you said, it's the first really wireless, mass-produced model by a major manufacturer in DCC to be able to...
Quality built,
Right. Sure. And as you saw in the tour, the quality control, the testing, all of that goes through as well.
Yeah.
And when they're testing the Blunamis, they also have it's actually an iPad, but they have their device down there and they connect to it through that, and they use the DCC system. So the testing's a little longer rather than just using the DCC system, but at least we can tell you that it's working.
Yeah. I suppose like anything with lithium-ion batteries right now, they're large at this point in time. I see that we're DCC decoders are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, even with the sound and the quality of the speakers. I'm hoping that we're going to be looking into that type of quality at some stage in the near future. That's going to go, because I'm HO modeler and I'd love to be able to see that type of technology in HO without having to run always coupled up coaches behind that holds all the battery systems effectively. So,
yep, exactly.
There's probably one question most people are answering. They're rolling their eyes at us saying, "Yeah, that's not DCC." But anyway, battery life. What sort of battery life are you getting out of something like that right now?
Well, kind of like you, I'm actually primarily an HO modeler.
Yeah.
And so this was just kind of a guilty pleasure that I was able to do with the Blunami and a battery.
Yeah.
Full disclosure, as I've mentioned in videos past, this model was actually given to me by a really good friend of mine, so of course I had to do it right.
Yeah.
But my point being is I haven't really run it, like, say, in an op session.
Sure.
So I can't say that I've had, 2.5 hours on a full charge.
Yeah.
But what I can tell you is I took it to the O-Scale National Convention.
Yeah.
And there, sitting on the table, demonstrating it live all day long, I got about a day and a half out of it before I had to charge it.
Yeah.
Now, granted, that's not running it constantly, and the decoder itself just uses minimal amount of current.
Sure.
So the battery life can last a whole lot longer. So you figure a 9 to 5 show, and then somewhere around the 10:30, 11 o'clock is when I had to actually charge it up.
Sure.
So it had enough life to do that. But the motor is going to be your biggest X factor. And that's, your battery life is going to factor on a couple of things. Your milliamp hours, which is how much the battery can supply before needing to be charged.
Sure.
The voltage, and then of course your current draw, your motor. Yeah. And all those are variable factors. And so one thing to kind of keep in mind is when you use higher voltage batteries, your motor's also going to draw more current. Because we go back to high school physics, voltage equals current times resistance. And so this particular model has an 11.1 volt battery. It's got a small, tiny CAN motor inside. And so I would venture to guess I'd probably get an hour to 2 hours out of operating that easily without having to charge it. Like I said, I can't honestly tell you that I've tested it one way or the other because I honestly have no idea. But like I said, there's some research out there that you can get that you look at the milliamp hours and basically kind of look at that and see, okay, most batteries, especially that you'd get small enough to put in this ON3 model, probably get you a couple of hours, maybe 2.5, 3 hours if you're lucky.
Significant amount of time.
Yeah.
I can see where I always love sort of pondering what direction our awesome hobby's going to go in. This is obviously one very exciting thing within DCC, and that was one of my next questions, so I'm just going to run with it.
Yep.
What I can see, people have probably watched at Hamburg in Germany, the Miniature Wonderland, probably the biggest model railroad that's ever going to get built that's going around right now. Would have seen the Falla car system and because people are probably asking how do you charge these things on the fly, and therefore I don't know if you've seen their Falla car system where they've got little buildings that come in, so the car will come into a building and it literally will charge off the mirrors on the side of the car. I can sort of see manufacturers in the near future probably looking at that.
Well, there's nothing to say that you couldn't use the track power pickups.
Correct. Yeah.
For charging your battery.
That's a very good
so
point,
you could power a section of rail, like say a passing siding or your depot, your station that has power on the rail that then charges the battery. Yeah. Just right now, I know that. Well, I shouldn't say I know. I don't know that you can power or charge the battery while it's being used. Yeah. That's where you have to start getting a little bit more into the electronics right now than we have as far as the battery control.
Now, this is probably from my point of view. I love my steam engines. So very complex sounds at times. Talk through the viewer here just a little brief few words about how you go about getting the sounds. Well, obviously, we talked about Feynman Fred. That's a great little story, and I'm going to have to remember that one moving forward. How you go about, obviously, this lovely locomotive, we'll be showing some B-roll shortly. How do you go about getting the different sounds onto your decoders?
So when we do our sound files, we do our sound projects, we go out and we contract with the railroads.
Right.
So we actually coordinate with them before we come out there and sign any releases, make sure we pay any donations or whatever they want for coming out and recording the equipment. And then we have a specialized set of audio tools that are designed to record specific things. We have a range of different types of microphones depending on what we're trying to get, and we coordinate with it. And so in multiple cases, we'll actually go and mic the locomotive up in several locations. In the case of, like, say, for example, the diesel, you'll have a mic that's pointing close to, but not too close to, the exhaust stack. Yeah. Then we'll have one by the crankcase, one by the traction motors, and then we get those multiple tracks coming into the recorder, and we're able to separate them, but then we're able to mix them together. And then when it comes to a steam locomotive, you've got so many different sounds. They're basically plumbing, for lack of a better term, nightmares. It's basically all pipes. And how water gets transferred from here or steam gets transferred from there. And so when we go in there, one of the benefits, I'll say, is it really helps to know how these things really work. So our sounds aren't just random playbacks. And what I mean by that is when your locomotive is running, we'll turn this guy on, you can kind of hear that air compressor running in the background. Well, it can just run as a noise, and most people would be perfectly happy. Well, right now we just powered it up, so it's charging the air reservoirs and so forth. And then eventually you'll hear it slow down, and then it gets to more of a maintenance level. But when you use your brake effect, when you use your F11 brake applications, you're using the air. So what happens? The compressor has to cycle more frequently to charge that train line. And so when we go out and we work with the railroads, and see, now you can kind of hear it's settled down a little bit. We'll go ahead and turn him off. But there it goes. But when the sounds are being played, we go out and we record the specific locomotive sounds. So we'll hear the injector. Okay, we've got a mic right up next to the injector. Okay, turn on the injector. And then they'll turn on the injector. Everybody's quiet. They'll run it for 30, 40 seconds and then shut it off. And we'll do this several times, and we'll bring that stuff back to get the cleanest sounds. Whistle, you have the dynamo sounds, and that's all selectable based on which locomotive you've got. There's different bell recordings, so we've recorded different bells at different ring rates so you get the right resonance. And so when it comes to our steam locomotive, we have 90 different whistles that we've recorded. We have 54 bell recordings, 10 different exhaust chuffs, 10 air compressors, 8 dynamos. There's different types of fuel, so whether it's a hand-shoveled coal, auger-fed coal, oil, or wood burner. You have different air compressors to choose from. You have different injectors, as I mentioned. There's the power reverse or manual Johnson bar. So this would be a manual Johnson bar, and then this would have the power reverse located on the side. So all of those sounds are mixed into the decoder that are selectable by the user, either through CVs on DCC or using your app in the menus in the app. And with that, we've come up, I sat there one day and I was counting. I said, man, how many different sound effects do I have in this thing? And I went through and 90 whistles can be paired with any of the 54 bells, can be paired with any of the 10 exhaust chuffs. Oh, I forgot to mention articulated exhaust or a standard conventional rod or even a 3-cylinder is some of the choices. And anyway, so I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, what are all the different sounds? Not counting volume control, not counting equalizer, reverb, or any other physical adjustments that you can modify to change the sound effects, I came up with 2.1 billion with a B possible different sound combinations. Wow. Just what I mentioned. And the reason I point out that I'm not talking about audio or volume mixers is because as an HO modeler, I kind of been wandering a bit over the last several years, and I've been modeling some 1860s locomotives. I have an 1860s model of the General as she lived in 1860.
Lovely.
Well, in 1860, they didn't have electric lights. They didn't have electric dynamos. So if I take that volume to 0, technically that's a new profile, but I'm not counting that. They also didn't have air compressors because they didn't use air brakes at that time.
Sure.
So if I take my air compressor volume and set it to 0, and I take some of the others associated braking sounds, like the air brake release and the air automatic for the train brake sounds, and set those to 0, technically there's new profiles again, and I'm not changing the sound, I'm just shutting it off. And that's not counted in that 2.1 billion. So then once you factor in different volume settings, different reverb and echo, which allows you to have some different sounds of the tone. You can also adjust the equalizer. So you can boost certain frequencies and reduce certain frequencies. You really have everything you ever want in there. There's over 50 different sound effects that are that some are selectable, some are not. So things like we talked about Fireman Fred.
Sure.
There's when you select the different fuels, you have Fireman Fred goes from shoveling coal to the sound of an auger, or if you have an oil burner, then you have the sound of the atomizer type sounds, and all of those are selectable in the decoder. So you really can build just about any steam engine you want by using our Tsunami 2 or the Blunami now.
Got to put my neck on the line here. Obviously, what George has explained to us, this is probably one of the reasons why some of the tech is starting to get a little bit expensive. You just imagine the person power, the research, the development that goes into something like this. That's why we're paying people, that's why we're paying good money for this stuff, and Soundtraxx quality product, so you know it's going to sound beautiful with their speakers. So George, thanks very much for showing us around Soundtraxx. Just a mere Australian like myself emailing you and coming out all this way, 15,000 miles to come and meet you, and it's been fantastic. So I will put the links to everything below. If you are a Soundtraxx user or any other user, it doesn't really matter. I will put a link to your work, because some of the work that he's done, and I think I first came across you, What's Neat this week, with
Ken Patterson.
Ken Patterson was the first came across, I think that's where I started following yourself. So I will put a link to all that below. Some of the tutorials are second to none when it comes to setting CVs, and the knowledge is just absolutely awesome, and thank you for sharing that with us new modelers. So
yeah, absolutely, and we enjoy doing it, and I mentioned it again, you guys, if you're in the area and you decide to come out, be sure to contact us. We'll be happy to give you a tour. And if you do have any further questions beyond what we've talked about today, feel free to give us a call or an email. Email probably from the other side of the world would be a little easier, more cost effective. But you can send us to support@soundtraxx.com, or you can call the office Monday through Friday, 9 to 5:30 Mountain Standard Time here in the U.S. And you can get a person on the phone. We're happy to help answer any questions we can for you. Because ultimately, while this is our business, we want you to enjoy our products, and this is your hobby, and you want to enjoy your hobby. And so we try to push the envelope to give you the best products to help you get the most out of your hobby. And that's why we've given you all these different settings and adjustments and features, so that you can decide how much or how little you want to implement into your models. And we're here to help you every step of the way. So feel free to contact us anytime. We're always happy to help.
Beautiful. So don't forget to subscribe, like, click that little bell icon to be notified of upcoming content. And as I said, everything will be below. So thanks for watching. See you next time.
Make sure you subscribe, click that little bell icon to be notified of upcoming videos. Support us on Patreon, like us on Facebook and Instagram @Model Railroad Techniques.